Stop scrolling for 1 second and try this. Sit down on the floor, cross your legs, and stand back up without using your hands. Did you do it, or did you just wince? Because you already know what would happen. Here's the uncomfortable truth I've learned after years of treating men in their 60s, 70s, and beyond. I can walk into a room, watch a man sit down and stand back up one time, and I'll know more about how long he's going to live than his last 3 doctor's visits ever told him. Not his weight, not his cholesterol, not even his blood pressure, how his body moves. And here's the thing that should terrify most men watching this. The average 60-year-old today can't pass that simple test, can't do it without a hand on the floor, a knee for support, or grabbing the couch on the way up. And that failure, that one small embarrassing moment, is quietly linked to a dramatically higher risk of dying years earlier than the men who can still do it clean. I'm Dr. Emily Carter, and today I'm giving you 5 simple tests, not workouts, not routines, just 5 things your body should still be able to do if you're over 60. If you can do all 5, you are, without exaggeration, healthier than the vast majority of men your age walking around right now. And the one at number 1 has nothing to do with strength at all. It's the one almost every man over 60 has quietly given up on without even realizing what it's costing him. Before we start, if you actually want to know where you stand, hit subscribe now, because I'm going to walk you through exactly how to test yourself on each one, and drop your age in the comments. I want to see how many of you can pass all 5. Let's get into it. Coming in at number 5, getting up off the floor without using your hands. This sounds almost too simple to matter, but researchers actually built an entire scoring system around it called the sitting rising test. You sit down on the floor, cross-legged, and stand back up, and for every hand or knee you use for support, you lose a point. Here's what stunned the researchers who studied this in men over 50. The men who could do it with 0 points off, no hands, no knees, no wobble, had a dramatically lower risk of dying over the following years compared to men who needed both hands and both knees just to get vertical again. Why does something this basic predict so much? Because rising from the floor requires an entire chain working together at once. Leg strength, core stability, balance, flexibility in your hips and ankles. Most men in their 60s haven't lost the ability to do any one of those things dramatically. What they've lost is the ability to coordinate all of them simultaneously, because they simply stopped practicing the movement. Nobody sits on the floor anymore. We stopped doing it in our 30s and 40s, and by 60, the body has quietly forgotten how. Think about how often you actually sit on the ground as an adult. Maybe at the beach, maybe playing with a grandchild for a few minutes before your knees remind you why you don't do it more. That's usually it. Compare that to when you were a kid, sitting and standing off the floor dozens of times a day without a second thought. Your body isn't broken, it's just out of practice, and out of practice movement patterns fade faster than most men expect. I had a patient, 63, retired contractor, strong as an ox by every conventional measure, could still carry lumber, still swung a hammer most weekends, but when I asked him to sit down on the floor and stand back up, he needed both hands and it took him nearly 10 seconds. He was stunned. He thought of himself as one of the fittest guys he knew. We started incorporating floor-to-standing drills into his routine. Nothing fancy, just getting down and up 10 times a day. Within 2 months, he was doing it with 1 hand. Within 4, with none. He told me afterward that it changed how he thought about fitness entirely. He'd spent years focused on how much he could lift and never once tested how well he could simply move. The fix here isn't complicated. Practice getting up and down off the floor a few times a week. Play with your grandkids down at ground level instead of from a chair. Your body relearns fast, but only if you ask it to. That's number 5. What's ahead matters even more. Number 4 is something most men stop doing entirely by their 60s without even noticing: carrying real weight in each hand for a sustained distance. Farmers carries essentially a heavy bag of groceries in each hand, a couple of paint cans, anything that forces your grip and your core to hold steady under load while you walk. This one ranks above the floor test because grip strength specifically has shown up again and again in research as one of the single strongest predictors of overall mortality in older adults. Weaker grip strength has been linked to a meaningfully higher risk of death from all causes, and it's not really about your hands at all. Grip strength is a proxy. It's a window into your total muscle mass, your nervous system's ability to recruit muscle fibers, and how well your body has held on to strength as you've aged. Here's the part that gets missed. Most men don't lose grip strength because their hands got weak. They lose it because they simply stopped picking up heavy things. If the heaviest object in your daily routine is a coffee mug or a TV remote, your grip strength quietly declines year after year, and with it, a whole cascade of related strength throughout your forearms, shoulders, and back. I always tell my patients that carrying weight is one of the most underrated exercises there is because it's functional. It's exactly what your body needs for real life, hauling groceries in from the car, moving furniture, picking up a grandchild. When a man in his 60s tells me he can still carry 2 full bags of groceries up a flight of stairs without stopping or switching hands, I already know a lot about his cardiovascular health, his muscle mass, and his overall resilience before I've even looked at a single lab result. It's worth pointing out how this connects to independence later in life too. The single biggest predictor of whether an older man ends up needing assisted living isn't some rare disease. It's whether he can still perform basic physical tasks unassisted, carrying his own groceries, lifting a suitcase, moving a trash can to the curb. Grip strength and carrying capacity are directly tied to that independence. Losing them isn't just an inconvenience. It's often the first domino. The good news is this comes back fast with basic effort. Carry actual weight, regularly. A loaded backpack on a walk, 2 dumbbells or 2 water jugs for a farmer's carry around the yard. Even a few minutes a few times a week rebuilds grip and core strength surprisingly quickly. That's number 4. Numbers 3 and 2 get into something even more revealing. Number 3 is one that catches men off guard because it feels so ordinary. Walking briskly for 15 or 20 minutes straight without needing to stop and catch your breath. This ranks above grip strength and the floor test because it's a direct measure of your cardiovascular capacity, and cardiovascular capacity is arguably the single best overall predictor of how many healthy years you have left. Research following older adults over time has consistently found that walking speed alone predicts survival almost as reliably as a full medical workup. Doctors sometimes call gait speed a vital sign, right alongside blood pressure and heart rate because it captures so much at once: heart health, lung capacity, muscle strength, balance, even cognitive function. Here's what's happening under the surface when a man in his 60s can still walk briskly without gasping. His heart is efficiently pumping oxygenated blood to working muscles. His lungs are extracting oxygen effectively. His blood vessels are flexible enough to handle the increased demand. None of that is guaranteed by 60. For a lot of men, decades of sitting, poor conditioning, and creeping weight gain have quietly stiffened the whole system so that a brisk walk up an incline leaves them winded and needing to stop. What surprises a lot of my patients is that this decline is rarely sudden. It happens over 10 or 15 years, so slowly that a man simply adjusts his life around it without realizing it's happening. He parks closer, he takes the elevator instead of 1 flight of stairs. He tells himself he's just not a walker anymore. None of those are conscious decisions about health. They're quiet accommodations to a body that's been allowed to decondition, one small avoidance at a time. I had a patient in his late 60s, a retired teacher who told me he'd never really exercised in any structured way in his life. But every single day without fail, he walked briskly for 45 minutes, rain or shine. His resting heart rate, his blood pressure, his labs, every marker I checked looked like a man 15 years younger. He never lifted a weight in his life. He just never stopped walking, and walking with intention, not just shuffling around the block. If you can still walk at a real pace uphill for 15 to 20 minutes and hold a conversation without gasping for air at the end of it, you're ahead of most men your age. Full stop. The fix, if you're not there yet, is refreshingly simple. Walk daily and walk with a bit of purpose, not just a stroll. Add an incline when you can. Push your pace slightly past comfortable a few times a week. Your cardiovascular system adapts remarkably well at any age, if you consistently ask a little more of it. That's number 3. Numbers 2 and 1 are the ones that surprise almost everyone. Number 2 outranks all 3 of the above, and it's the one that quietly terrifies me the most when a patient fails it, standing on one leg, eyes open, for 10 full seconds. This sounds almost embarrassingly easy, but a well-known study following men in their 50s and beyond found that those who couldn't balance on one leg for 10 seconds had a substantially higher risk of dying within the following decade compared to men who could. Not a small difference, a dramatic one. Balance is one of the first things to quietly erode with age, and one of the last things men think to train. It requires your inner ear, your vision, your proprioception, your body's sense of where it is in space, and your leg and core muscles all communicating in real time. When any part of that system starts to decline, balance goes first, often years before anyone notices because we rarely test it in daily life. You don't realize your balance has eroded until you're reaching for a railing you never used to need, or catching yourself on a curb you used to step off without thinking. The reason falls become so dangerous after 60 isn't really the fall itself. It's that a body with declining balance, declining bone density, and declining muscle mass turns a minor stumble into a fracture, and a fracture into a cascade of complications that can take years off a man's life. Balance training is quite literally protecting your future. I've seen this play out in the worst possible way. A patient's father, mid-70s, otherwise healthy, tripped on a garden hose, a completely unremarkable stumble. the kind he would have shrugged off at 50. He broke his hip. 18 months later, he had never fully recovered his independence, and his overall health had declined sharply in ways that had nothing to do with the hip itself. That's the real danger of poor balance. After 60, it's not the fall, it's everything the fall sets in motion. I had another patient who genuinely could not believe he failed this test, golfed every weekend, walked constantly, felt strong, but standing on one leg, eyes open, he was down after 4 seconds every single time. We added simple balance drills, standing on one leg while brushing his teeth, walking heel to toe down a hallway, nothing that required equipment or a gym. Within 6 weeks, he was holding 15-20 seconds without effort. If you can stand on one leg for 10 seconds right now without wobbling or reaching for something, you're doing better than a large portion of men your age. And that single ability is quietly protecting you from one of the most dangerous events that can happen to an older man. And now, the one that surprises almost everyone because it has nothing to do with strength, balance, or endurance at all. Number 1 is sleep, specifically still being able to get a full night of deep, largely uninterrupted sleep without medication. By 60, this becomes rare. Sleep architecture naturally shifts with age, deep sleep shortens, and for many men it fragments entirely, interrupted by frequent waking, restless legs, or the bathroom trips that come with an aging bladder. Most men over 60 have simply accepted broken sleep as the price of getting older. But here's what the research actually shows. Men over 60 who maintain strong, deep, largely uninterrupted sleep have meaningfully better outcomes across nearly every system in the body, compared to men whose sleep has fragmented. Deep sleep is when your body handles tissue repair, when growth hormone is released, when your brain clears out metabolic waste that accumulates during the day. Fragmented sleep interrupts every one of those processes, and the effects compound over years. It's linked to higher rates of cognitive decline, weaker immune function, and higher cardiovascular risk. I tell my older patients that sleep quality after 60 tells me more about biological age than almost anything else I can measure. A 65-year-old man who still sleeps deeply and wakes up genuinely rested is physiologically often years younger than his birth certificate suggests. A 58-year-old man whose sleep is shattered every night is often carrying the cardiovascular and cognitive risk profile of someone considerably older. What makes this one so easy to overlook is that broken sleep doesn't announce itself as a health problem. It gets written off as just part of getting older, something everyone assumes is inevitable. But when I dig into a patient's history, the men who sleep the worst are almost always the ones who've stopped treating their evenings with any real structure, scrolling in bed, a nightcap that feels harmless, a bedroom that's too warm or too bright. These are fixable habits, not unavoidable consequences of aging. The encouraging part is that sleep quality is one of the most responsive systems in the body, cutting caffeine after early afternoon, limiting alcohol in the evening since it fragments deep sleep even when it helps you fall asleep faster, keeping a consistent wake time even on weekends, getting real daylight exposure early in the day, which anchors your circadian rhythm, addressing an enlarged prostate or sleep apnea if either is present, since both quietly wreck sleep in older men and often go undiagnosed for years. If you're over 60 and you're still sleeping deeply through most of the night, waking up rested rather than groggy, you're in a very real sense aging slower than most of your peers. When you look at all 5 of these together, a pattern emerges that I think is genuinely encouraging. None of them are about being an athlete. None of them require a gym membership, a personal trainer, or turning back the clock to your 20s. They're about whether your body has held on to its basic functional capabilities, the ones we all had effortlessly at 20, and quietly let erode over 4 decades of sitting more, moving less, and never testing ourselves, getting up off the floor without your hands, carrying real weight without your grip giving out, walking briskly without losing your breath, balancing on one leg for 10 seconds, sleeping deeply through the night. Each one on its own tells a story. All 5 together tell you almost everything about how well you're actually aging, regardless of what the calendar says. The men I see in their 70s who are still doing all 5 aren't unicorns. They're not genetic anomalies. Almost without exception, they're men who simply never stopped asking their bodies to do these ordinary things. They kept getting down on the floor. They kept carrying groceries instead of asking for help. They kept walking with purpose instead of drifting. They never stopped testing their balance in small ways throughout the day. And they took their sleep seriously instead of accepting broken rest as inevitable. What I want you to take from this isn't anxiety. It's clarity. None of these 5 things require you to become a different person. They require you to stop avoiding the ordinary movements your body was built for, and to stop treating broken sleep as something you just have to live with. If you read through this list and felt confident on all 5, genuinely, congratulations. You're healthier than the vast majority of men your age, and you should keep doing exactly what you're doing. If 1 or 2 gave you pause, that's not a verdict. It's information, and every single one of these can be rebuilt with consistent, unremarkable effort starting this week. Tell me in the comments, honestly, how many of these 5 you can still do and which one you're going to start working on. I read every comment, and I love seeing which of you are taking this seriously. If this was useful to you, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one.